Hello everyone, my name is James and this is Real Biased Gaming. The Total War series and its producers, the people of Creative Assembly, have long stood as one of the biggest strategy game series in the industry. Well known for a mix between turn-based, politics, and city management, and then up-close, visceral, real-time tactical battles. Their biggest success story to date was actually the original Rome Total War game, which improved on the graphics engines of its predecessors, the two of them, and then created a much more living and involved world map, among many other improvements for the game. Personally, I always enjoyed the feel of Rome Total War, just because I enjoyed the strategy and tactics that were used actually in that time, historically, when Rome was kind of at near its peak there, and how the limited scope of technology back then, where you don't have like gunpowder and things like that, it allows for a more focused but still very complex and customizable gameplay experience. Now, Total War Rome 2 has been announced, and GameSpot released a walkthrough of one of the historical battles that's going to be available in the game, called the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where the Romans are actually ambushed by a very large army of Gallic soldiers. And I really encourage you to check out that video. It's really impressive. I'll have a link for it. And I'm going to go over my impressions of the game and everything that we've actually seen so far, what I'm excited about, what I'm really looking forward to. First off, the new engine that Creative Assembly is using looks absolutely stunning. Total War games, they've always really impressed me with how they can achieve near like first-person shooter or adventure game style graphical quality on huge landscapes and on hundreds and hundreds of soldiers who are fighting in their own unique ways all over the battlefield. And that's not to mention some really stunning and solid work on the battlefields themselves, which involve anything from coastal villages to snow-covered plains to giant medieval castles over the years. The new engine blows everything else out of the water, though. From the moment that the video actually begins, I was stunned by how lifelike everything really looked. This is not just beautifully rendered trees. I'm talking about there are ponds and there are roads that just seem like carved out of this like living world. And the terrain kind of elevates and depresses really naturally, and you have these rock outcroppings and all this really cool stuff that you haven't really seen on Total War battlefields in the past. The graphical engine they are using also just gives the features as well as the soldiers a feeling, like both actually belong in the same place. Even in the most recent entry to the series, Shogun 2, often the battle map, it looked good and the armies looked good, but they never seemed to really fit together or mesh together when you were actually playing the tactical battles. Like you knew they were made by a designer, and were not actually real places where your soldiers were fighting and dying for their country. Rome 2 seems like it's headed in the right direction when it comes to the making a more organic world for your soldiers to actually fight in, for the battles to take place in. In a game where vision is as important to the player as it was to the actual historical generals from Roman times, I really appreciate what they're doing with the camera in this game. The first edition is actually a very cinematic angle where you can lock onto a unit and kind of sit right above their shoulders and go charging into combat right alongside them. It's really impressive. Now, this video is created using a very simple build for the game, so a lot of the fighting and impact animations are not really there, not on the level that they'll actually be on launch. In fact, at one point the developer is actually running the shot. He talks about, he grabs some cavalry and has them charge some archers, saying that basically, cavalry charges have always been really impressive, and no less so here in Rome 2, where cavalry charges in and people go flying and they get knocked off their feet and go, flying through the air and all that craziness, but when you actually see it in the video, the archers really just kind of get like shuffled around as the horses charge in on them. Nobody really goes flying at all, but this feature will make the gameplay much more interesting, entertaining, especially when those animations are finally in the actual build that we get on release. The other camera option is actually more tactical. You can now zoom all the way out and get a top-down overview of a very large portion of the battlefield, showing yours and enemy units as more pieces on a tabletop, on a game board, rather than fully rendered infantry cohorts. This will be helpful in large battles to kind of reassess positioning and where main objectives are, or where the enemy line is weakest, as well as just being able to pick out your individual units from what inevitably becomes a crazy, chaotic battlefield. Now, When I look at a Total War game and I dream about the future of the franchise, all my worries, they really come from the campaign map. Battles in Total War have always been, really entertaining and decently balanced and everything, and they're also easily skipped if that's not really your cup of tea, or you've been doing too many battles recently, you just want to auto-resolve them and move on to the next turn. And this video actually brings up one of my biggest gripes with the campaign map in the Total series, which is actually ambushes, because this whole battle was actually a very, very famous ambush of the Roman army. I cannot remember how many times I have looked on the campaign map and seen one of my enemy's armies walk into the woods right by one of my fortresses and just sit there. And my scouts can't find them, and inevitably my army has to walk right by them, and they leap out and they ambush me, and it's really, really frustrating. Also, the city management and world economy, I'd really like to see a video on that, and hopefully that'll be coming soon with this new gameplay video out. Hopefully we're getting some kind of overworld map view of that really, really soon. I feel that city management, just the economy, has grown really, really stale in the last several iterations of the Total War games. I want to be able to be more involved in what my cities are actually doing and not having to build the same buildings over and over and over and over again automatically, and kind of getting nothing new as my empire kind of expands and gets bigger and bigger. And also maybe being able to defend my biggest and best cities without having to assign half of my enlisted force to the post. I think that would be really, really helpful as well. Shogun 2 actually had a really good idea with this, where you actually had larger and larger contingents of just housed soldiers that would only fight on defense in the castles as you built larger and larger castles. But I think more could be done on that front to make it a little more interesting, a little more entertaining, from just a customizability aspect as well as the battle aspect itself. There's plenty to speculate on, of course, but I will save a lot of that for when we get more and more videos about Total War Rome 2. I'm looking forward to it, as Creative Assembly has a really solid track record of entertaining me for hours and hours on end, and from what I've seen so far, it does not look like they will be actually ruining that reputation anytime soon with Rome 2. Now, I'm actually really, really interested in seeing what you guys think have been some of the most frustrating parts of playing a Total War game over the years, and I really want to see how you would like to see those problems addressed in Rome 2. Apparently, the design team for this game, the whole project, was actually given a 40% bigger budget than any of the other Total War games in the past. So, just really think big and on what kind of improvements and things you're looking for and hoping for, as I'm sure we're going to see a lot more big changes besides just this awesome graphical engine when Rome 2 finally actually comes out. Also, definitely let me know what you'd like me to keep an eye on and what you'd like me to maybe report on as we get closer and closer to the release date for Shogun 2. Now, it doesn't have an exact release date. It's supposed to be coming out sometime in the second half of this year, though, so we'll probably be getting that in the next several months. Well, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more gaming news, impressions, and review content. I post videos on Thursdays and then throughout the week as other stuff comes up. Once again, my name is James, and this is Real Biased Gaming.